Welcome to the Northern Outer Banks Podcast. From wild horses to small town legends, this is where stories, history, nature, and everyday life come together. Each episode is a front porch conversation with the people and places that give this stretch of North Carolina its soul. Whether you've been coming here for years or just found it on a map, pull up a chair. You're in for a good story. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Northern Outer Banks Podcast. I'm your host, Miles Daniels, and we are joined today by Chris Winter, the Chief Executive Officer of the Corolla Wild Horse Fund. I hope I got that right, Chris.
You did.
Welcome. It's a privilege to have you with us today.
Terrific to be here. Thanks for having me.
Chris, arguably, the wild horses on the Northern Outer Banks, what we call the 4x4, that's the unpaved beach area of the Northern Outer Banks, is one of the most, if not the most popular attraction for our guests who visit the region, at least in the Northern Outer Banks area. But I would venture to say that maybe a lot of our guests listening today don't know a lot about the Corolla Wild Horse Fund, and that's what we're here to talk about. Sure. And we'll talk about the horses and their history. That's fascinating. But for those listening today, help us understand, what is the Corolla Wild Horse Fund? What is your function? What is your mission as a nonprofit organization on the Northern Outer Banks?
Sure, yeah. We are a small nonprofit, very traditional nonprofit organization, and our mission is to preserve and protect the Corolla Wild Horses. We have been in existence for about 35 years now, and formed out of concern for the horses, quite honestly. As development and more people and more cars moved north into Duck and moved north of Duck, there was really a dangerous situation for the horses, and so some people came together, said we've got something that's really incredible, that's really important, and something that's worth protecting here. Let's figure out how to do it. And from those earliest days, we've continued that mission on into today with incredible community support.
You said 35 years, and so if for those listening, can you paint a picture of what the Northern Outer Banks looked like 35 years ago, and how has it changed over the course of those years? And what does that mean for the horses?
Sure. Back decades ago, the horses were not confined to the four-wheel drive area where they are now. They all live, as you mentioned before, on that beach north of the pavement. So you go back through the decades here in the late 1900s and then on into the 21st century, as development moved north, as the road was paved further and further north, more cars came, more people came, more interaction with the horses, and that's where we had horses being hit and the danger elevated for the horses. So it was a very different time on the Outer Banks, but it's been good since then, right? The development and the people have continued to come and continued to support the economy, and part of that draw is the horses. So we try to manage all of this in a sustainable way.
You mentioned a good point, and correct me if I'm wrong on this. I don't think that road was paved or finished, I think around 1987.
That's right.
NC 12 was paved, and that was north of Duck, leading into Corolla, and then up to the 4x4. So a lot has changed since that happened.
It's changed, and when you think about it, 1987 is really not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. So not only has it changed, it's changed rather quickly. And so I think that's one of our challenges, because we've seen that change continue to happen quickly. For, COVID is an example. As COVID came in, we saw another round of really rapid development. In this case, on the north, on the four-wheel drive beaches, and we're still feeling the impacts of that, and how that translates into impacts for the horses.
And we see development as a positive thing. Absolutely. We rely on our guest, or what we call the visitor economy. That is the lifeblood, arguably, of not just the Northern Outer Banks, but the larger Outer Banks region, Dare County, Currituck County, Hyde County, mainly being Ocracoke. Sure. But there is that balance, that delicate dance with progress being development, and what you do as an organization, preservation, protecting. What does that look like? What do you mean when you say preserve and protect the wild horses of the Northern Outer Banks?
The way I like to kind of view this is the Outer Banks is a generational tourist attraction, right? People have come here for, they come here because their great grandparents came here. They want their grandkids to be able to come here and visit, and so they might even stay in the same house. They might stay in the same week they've done for decades. We want, as far as preserve and protecting, we want them to be able to have that same experience that perhaps their grandparents did have, to see the horses in the same environment that their grandparents may have. And so development is a good thing. Development supports everything we have ongoing out here. And it's a matter of how do we make that happen in a sustainable manner? So how do we continue development? How do we continue to welcome visitors here? How do we know people will continue to move out here to live. How do we manage all of that, bring that together, and preserve and protect the horses, preserve and protect the environment, preserve and protect the things that make the Outer Banks so special? And that's really where you get into the core of our work. And we do that through a lot of education directed at visitors and residents alike. And we do that through monitoring the herd on a daily basis.
And it really, going back to the old saying, it takes a village, that really relies on partnerships with the local community who live in that area year-round, law enforcement, tourism. Let's talk a little bit about that,
Sure.
Those partnerships, and how do you, in terms of preservation and protection, how do you rely on the local communities around the Northern Outer Banks to make that happen?
Well, I am a huge believer in partnership. Like I said, we're a very small operation. And so none of this is going to happen successfully or continue to happen successfully without a lot of partners sitting around the table saying, okay, how do we all do our part? How do we all play a role in protecting what is so special out here? And so, yes, local residents, enormously important. Our work with them, our relationship with them. Many of them, have grown up alongside some of those horses, and they view themselves as, and rightly so, as caretakers of the horses. And so they're a very important part of our conversation. They're a very important part of the process of protecting everything that's up there. So we look at, when we talk about sustainable development, for instance, that requires all of these different constituencies: the county, tourism, local residents, the rental agencies, the horse tours, businesses that rely on the visitor economy. We all need to come together and say, all right, we have a shared interest in protecting what brings people here. We might have different reasons for coming to that table, but we have a shared interest in protecting that. So how can we work together to have a voice that's more powerful ultimately, and really consistently approaches things from the idea of sustainable development, and and saying, hey, we want future generations to have the same experience that people are here today.
As we mentioned, we know our visitors love the wild horses, and I'm certain share that in terms of wanting to preserve and protect. When we talk about education, I know we have the billboards, public service announcements, the billboards on the mainland, please do not feed the wild horses. Let's just, in terms of education, let's talk about that. What do you and the Corolla Wild Horse Fund do in terms of education? What would you like those listening today? We talk about generation after generation visiting. Sometimes we have first-time visitors who have never seen the horses before. What should visitors and locals alike know in terms of the education aspect of what the Corolla Wild Horse Fund does?
So that's every winter we sit down and kind of plot out our plan for how we're going to reinvest in education each year, because it's essential to what we do. It will never stop being a part of what we do, because like you said, as much as this is a generational tourist spot, we have many first-time visitors also. So we have the billboards, we do things like this as much as possible, where we get our voice out there so people can hear it. We use our social media feed extensively for education, and we know we have a lot of visitors that follow our social media feed. We also work with the rental agencies. We have refrigerator clings that they will make sure get on the refrigerators of all the of as many rental homes as we can possibly get to up on the northern Outer Banks. So it's kind of an all-encompassing effort. And ultimately, what we want people to know is just the basic safety of interacting with a wild horse. The ordinance is that you have to remain more than 50 feet away from the horse. Well, that's not only for the safety of the horse, it's also for the safety of people. These are, it's really important to remember these are wild horses. They're wild animals. They are unpredictable. They are not like people see a horse and they think, oh, that's like the horse, when I go to the stable and that, that very calm domesticated horse that I know, and I can walk right up to it and feed it an apple. It's just a totally different environment. And so it's so important for people to remember that they are dealing with wild animals. And so keep your distance. We don't want people feeding them, and that's against the ordinance as well, is feeding the horses at all out in the wild. So really it's a matter of keeping your distance and having this incredible visual experience. And there's nothing like it. When you see one of those horses or a few of those horses up on a dune, and you got the waves crashing in the background. I mean, there's nothing like it. Just enjoy that, and there's nowhere else to enjoy that.
The Outer Banks is known for its history, and that includes family history. Mm-hmm. Lots of families on the Outer Banks take pride in the fact that they can trace their lineage back 300 years. Yeah. My family's 36. So you'll see Daniels and Tillett and Bass Knight and Meekins. The horses have been here since the 15th, nearly 500 or over 500 years. Lots of myths and folklore around how they arrived. What do you know about the history of the horses?
Yeah. Well, the oral tradition of the Outer Banks is so special, and the horses are part of that. You'll hear lots of different stories, but certainly they are of European descent, and certainly Europeans we know brought horses across the ocean, and whether they came directly from a shipwreck and made their way on shore or not. What we do know is that they came from Europe. And what we do know is that as colonists established in the Americas, horse farms were established further south in what is now Central America and South America. And there came to be a thriving horse trade up and down the East Coast, inland to the Mississippi River and around. So it's very likely that the horses are connected to that horse trade. So perhaps there is lineage from the Americas as well. But I think that it's the story, the oral tradition. You mentioned some of those long held family names on the Outer Banks. The horses are part of that conversation. They're another one of those families, so to speak, and they connect us to a different time on the Outer Banks. But it's a time, as you mentioned, that there's enormous pride in that history. And I think it's really important that we hold on to that history and that we do tell those stories and that we continue the oral tradition. And we can look at the horses. Again, I was mentioning, you see a horse on the dune and you got the waves crashing behind it. You could have seen that exact same thing 500 years ago. And it's important to connect that and to hold on to that history.
In many ways, the horses are the story of the Outer Banks. And the story of the Outer Banks, as I see it, is a story of resilience, storms, volatility of barrier islands, shifting, development. What is it? I mean, because the organization that you work with has been around 30-some years, but these horses have been around 500.
Right.
How have they maintained and been able to survive a place like the Outer Banks?
Resilience, you nailed it. I mean, they are incredibly resilient, and they are banker horses now. So they are of the Outer Banks. Even though we can trace their heritage elsewhere, we know now they're what's called a landrace breed because they have been here for so long that everything they are is of the Outer Banks. They have evolved to live here. They have evolved to exist here. They've evolved to survive here. similar to those longtime families that are still very much here in the Outer Banks. They have evolved and interact, I'm sure, today with the economy in a different way than their ancestor did 200 years ago, obviously. So it's that never-ending kind of change of life of somewhere that is at the mercy of the wind and the tides. You have to survive. You have to figure out how to survive. You have to be resilient. And the horses are just a perfect match for that Outer Banks history, because they, like the people, have done that and figured out how to do it and continue to figure out how to do it.
A few years ago, national headlines, I forget the name of the storm. I think it was a tropical system or nor'easter, whatever it might have been. And it made quite a few national headlines in terms of how the horses, because I know on social media there's always a lot of, and rightfully so, concern from visitors and locals alike about the horses when a storm, and inevitably that happens here, comes through. It's pretty unique in terms of what they do to protect themselves during these storms.
They know, and usually, especially, you have a coastal storm coming up the day before. When you're up there, you'll see far fewer horses out on the beach. They'll start kind of making their way back into the marshes, and as is kind of come to be said, they put their butts to the wind. And our director of herd management, Meg Puckett, was being interviewed some years ago, I think, with the storm you were talking about, and that's how she described what they do, which is literally what they do. And we've had some fun with that over time, but it's a method of survival, and they know how to do it, and they can handle a storm way better than we can. And hence, they are still here 500 years later. And as we go through a season of nor'easters or coastal storms, they'll be just fine.
So interesting. Now, there are other herds on the East Coast: Shackleford Banks, Ocracoke, Cumberland Island, Georgia.
Cumberland Island.
Are these the same?
They're really, they are, but they're very different situations. Our horses up in the northern Outer Banks they live in a truly unique environment with the development that has taken place amidst their habitat. So they are the other herds do not really have that environment at all. So there's a very different kind of environment that they have had to adapt to. And our horses up on the four-wheel drive beach are literally living in a neighborhood full of people, and to a certain extent. Obviously, it's a very different place with the beach roads and no pavement, but horses will walk into garages. Horses are in your yard. That's how this herd has evolved, and the other herds really don't have that piece of it.
And in terms of day to day, what is it that you and your team are doing? We want to be clear, this is not a zoo environment.
Correct.
These are wild horses living in a natural habitat. Most of the guests who have the privilege of seeing the horses somewhat up close and personal, when we say up close, keep the distance. I think it's 50 feet, 50 length of a school bus or a bowling lane. You can look at it very different ways. That visual might help some. But that's just part of their natural habitat.
Right.
Behind those dunes and beaches, marshland, maritime forest, and that's why I think the herd's over 100 now. Yep. But on a given day, you may see a handful or a dozen or half dozen, if you're fortunate. But what are the horses doing today, and what are you and your team doing on a daily basis to take care of those?
So you're right. There's a lot of land up there. There's about 7,700 acres that the horses have access to. It's 11 miles north to south from the end of the pavement in Corolla to the Virginia border. So you're right. There are days, there are weeks, months where we won't even see certain horses. But our team, we are on the beach every day, and we are recording all kinds of information. So data about where they are, particular horses, the harems that they're with, what the ongoing behavior, how do they look? So that all gets recorded, and we've got files that exist for every horse out in the wild. So we are on the beach every day, and not only do our field stewards collect all that data during the more crowded seasonal times, they're up there also, as a source as a reminder for people to keep their distance. We have our logo on our vehicles, and so they kind of can help with that. But certainly we're not enforcement of any kind. So we're on the beach every day. We also run in Corolla. We have a museum and gift shop that is open all year round, other than January and February. And it's a great place. It's a piece of our educational process, but it's an opportunity for people to come in and talk to us, to learn more, to buy a T-shirt. It's really a neat place in the historic Corolla Village. And then the third piece of our daily work is our farm over in Grandy. So we have the Betsy Dowdy Equine Center, and that is where we house horses that have had to be removed from the wild, and they will live out the rest of their life there. So we are running a fully operational 24/7 farm that on occasion during the season, Mustang mornings every Wednesday, we open to the public and allow people to come in and have a totally different experience with the horses. So we have a broad geography for a small group of people, from the Virginia border on the 4-wheel drive beach all the way around to Grandy.
And again, that's located on what we call the mainland.
Correct.
And it's open, you said,
So during the season, every Wednesday,
okay,
from 10 to 2, we are open. And the neat thing is people come. We have a $10 donation, but there's no charge to come. Because we want people to have access to the horses. We want people to learn about the horses, because that education, that learning inspires more protection, inspires more engagement to protect. But when you're at the farm, you can pet. We'll bring horses out and people can pet them. People can have, all kinds of questions answered from our staff. We show a video. So totally different experience than when you're on the beach, which is really a visual experience. Here, it's a more interactive experience at the farm. So it's really a neat thing.
On average, what is the lifespan of a horse in that particular herd?
So we love it. When a horse gets into their 30s out in the wild, that's a full life. And we're seeing that happen more and more. So that's kind of, and then the best case scenario obviously is they live that whole life in the wild, that they don't ever come to the farm. The farm is there as a resource for horses that for one reason or another have to be removed. But if they can live those 25, 30 plus years out in the wild, that's what we're all here for.
And a newborn horse is called a foal. And so how many foals on average are born amongst
It's, 7 to 10 or so in a year is generally what we see. Spring-ish is the time, but it's not always, only in that time frame. But yeah, and that's what we're seeing as kind of the healthy number. The herd dynamics in that regard are healthy right now. So they're kind of replacing each other and they're keeping their population up, which is what we like to see.
Now, just for those listening, maybe who have maybe they're first-time visitors looking at booking a trip to the Outer Banks, to be clear, the Wild Horse Tours are privately operated. They are not part of the Corolla Wild Horse Fund, although strategic partnerships between the two. Walk us through what is the best way, any tips and tricks, insider information for those listening who might want to experience this amazing up close and personal with these wild horses.
The horse tours do a really good job. They are focused on really building an ecotourism model, and it's that idea of if you are going to come somewhere, if you're going to visit the Outer Banks, be part of the solution, be part of the long-term solution. And what I find and what we find is that tourists want to be part of that solution. They absolutely do. So you connect with any of the horse tours online. They do a great job, and they will take it. It's not only, I think what's neat and what people probably don't realize until they get out there is you're just not only driving on this, kind of hunt for horses. It's more to that. There's a lot of education. The drivers are well educated. We offer training to the drivers at the beginning of the season. So they are well educated, not only on the horses, but the history of the four-wheel drive and the history of the horses and the science of the ecosystem up there. So you get a full appreciation of this piece of land that is just so incredible. And I think the horse tours are a good opportunity because, a lot of times driving up on that beach, even with four-wheel drive, it takes some experience. It's not always the easiest thing in the world. So that kind of takes that worry out for you if you're not a veteran driver on the beach.
And these are experienced guides, so you'll get it up close and personal, but also some great history, stories, local stories. And to be clear, I mean, for a herd of over 100, most of the time the horses are not near the beach. They come out to cool off, flies, etc., but they're primarily in the maritime forest, the marshes. Is that right?
Yes, and I think people often think, they're always pictured out on the beach with these incredible pictures. Some people come and think, they're just lining the beach, and as you said, they're not. And in fact, it's much more common that they're not on the beach. So when you do get to see them on the beach, get some good pictures.
Absolutely. And for anyone who has experienced this or who, like all of us, love the horses and want to preserve and protect the herd, is there a way that they can help our listeners today? Volunteer, donations?
Yeah. Well, I would say the first thing is to engage and learn. And the best way to do that is to follow our social media feed. Our Facebook feed is really incredible. As we tell the entire story of the horses through that feed, from life to death, from all angles. So it's a great way to engage. It's a great way to kind of spread the word as well, and invite other people that you may know into that. And then yes, we're a small 501c3. We rely on the generosity of our supporters. So donations is enormously important to us. That can be done through our website at CorollaWildHorses.org. As far as volunteer opportunities, they are limited. We have some opportunities in Corolla. We had a lot of interest, as you can imagine, volunteering at the farm or with the horses. And that gets tricky from liability perspective and just things along those lines, because we are still dealing with wild animals.
Chris, in closing, let's imagine there's a billboard at the entrance of the 4x4. One sentence, what would you want it to say for those visiting?
Just responsibly enjoy the horses. They're so special. We need to protect them. They are at the heart of the Outer Banks. So be responsible and enjoy this special place.
Chris, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much for everything that you and your team are doing to protect and preserve this legacy, the most arguably iconic residents of the Outer Banks, the Northern Outer Banks, Corolla Wild Horses, as they're known. This has been informative, and we really appreciate you being here today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and it's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Here, wild horses roam windswept beaches, and the ocean stretches endlessly before you. Each sunrise brings a new adventure. Each breeze carries the salt and serenity of the sea. Climb our historic Red Brick Lighthouse. Savor fresh seafood and North Carolina barbecue. This is more than a vacation. It's a place that renews your spirit and keeps calling you back. Where in the Outer Banks? Only in the Northern Outer Banks.